Few children's authors have had the kind of impact that Maurice Sendak has, and in fact, this book, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, sold over 19 million copies, which is just astounding for a book like that. And in fact, it's just one of the most influential books of its kind. He is also responsible for a number of other works which he authored and illustrated, such as this series here, the Little Bear book series, which he illustrated. And there's also the great yet sometimes disturbing one, In the Night Kitchen, which I really loved growing up. That book happens to contain a lot of allusions to the Holocaust, which I definitely didn't realize when I was a kid, but when you read it now, it definitely does. This is not a coincidence, because as we're about to find out, Maurice Sendak hails from a Polish Jewish background. And so in this episode, what we're going to be doing is talking about his ancestry. I'm Yonah Paley, and I believe genealogy is fun. Let the wild rumpus start as we dive into the paternal ancestry of Maurice Bernard Sendak. Before we begin, I just want to give a quick shout out to two users on Genie.com whose details on the online public tree helped me to speed up the process of researching Maurice Sendak. So Victor and Hattie, thank you so much for your insights. And also before we begin, there's one other favor I have to ask you, which is that you demolish the like button, also subscribe to the YouTube channel, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I post new videos. So anyways, thank you so much for doing that, and let's begin. The author was born 1928 in Brooklyn, New York, the youngest child of Philip Sendak and Sadie Schindler. Now, from Philip's ship manifest, we can see that his original Jewish name was Pinchas, and when he came over in 1913, there is a reference on the manifest to his father, Israel, living behind in Europe. And from this manifest, we can also see that his town of origin was Miszienek, Poland. Between Philip's manifest and also his marriage certificate, as well as a lot of documents from JRI Poland, which were thankfully indexed, we are able to figure out that his parents' names were Israel Sendak and Bluma Burstein. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these indexed records, the original copy is not available online, so whatever details are on JRI Poland are pretty much all we've got. In order to obtain the original documents, you'd have to apply to the actual archive to get them. So there is some limited info on this family, but there's enough to take us back a few generations, thankfully. Now, Israel and Bluma's 1888 marriage certificate tells us that his parents were named Berek, Leib, and Etka Hinda. And Berek and Etka had at least 5 other children besides for Israel. A bunch of them were daughters who died very young, but there is actually one son, Lazar, aka Lazarus Sendak, who eventually moved to the United Kingdom. And what we can see is something very interesting, which is that both Israel and Lazarus named their firstborn son Philip, aka Pinchas. So Jewish naming patterns, while they're a little bit confusing at first, once you get the hang of them, they're really, really simple. And what this tells us is that there's almost certainly an ancestor, not so distant, who was named Pinchas, because they both named their firstborn sons Pinchas. So that gives us a direction to look in. And this is something you always want to be focusing on when you're doing Jewish genealogy, is don't just take a look at what your ancestor named their kids. Take a look at what their siblings named their kids, because oftentimes you'll see a name pop up on multiple lines, and this can tell you a lot. So the town they came from was Zambrov, and thankfully there's not a huge amount of Sendaks living in that town. While Berek's birth document is not online, there do seem to be a number of births for a couple named Pinchas and Chaya Feiga Sendak. So while there aren't any direct references to this being his father, given how small the family is and how people are clearly naming their firstborn child after someone with that name, it seemed very, very likely that Maurice Sendak's great-great-grandfather was named Pinchas. So this is essentially, after ruling out other possibilities, this is pretty clear that this is his ancestor. So his father would have been named after his grandfather. There is even an indexed death record for a Pinchas, son of Berek, which makes me think that this naming pattern might have even gotten repeated another generation. So Berek had Pinchas, Pinchas had Berek, Berek, whose grandson was Pinchas once again. But because this is so many generations removed and a lot of the documents from that era are missing or just don't exist, I am not confident to bring this line back any further than Maurice's great-great-grandfather. So there you go. Next time you're reading Where the Wild Things Are or any other Maurice Sendak books, you can know that his family hailed from both Misyenek and the nearby city of Zambrov, and his family immigrated in 1913, and his father was named after his grandfather. And in fact, I don't know what Maurice Sendak's Hebrew name was, but I would speculate, this is pure speculation, but his middle name was Bernard. Bernard is often a anglicized version of the Yiddish name Bear. Well, we know that Israel's father was Berek, which is another version of bear. So it's actually quite possible that he was also named for somebody, but I don't think there's a Hebrew gravestone available for Maurice, but this is something that is very likely. So anyways, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also be sure to follow me on social media. I've included links to both my Instagram and my Twitter. So thank you so much for watching this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.